All right. I think we'll try to get started here. Can they hear online? Are you able to hear Dave online? I guess you have to say something. Okay. They don't know.
Well, I did.
Is everybody hearing Dave? Guess we'll find out.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and try this here. So you can,
Are you hearing Dave? He's trying to talk to his phone.
Yep.
Oh,
God. This is going to take a little bit to get synced up. We're getting too much feedback there?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go with the speaker. All right. So, welcome once again, ASQ Phoenix. We're giving a presentation tonight, but before we get started, we've got a couple of business items to run through.
This is the one for the conference.
Okay.
Any microphones?
Yep.
All right. Hopefully we've got the right one this time. All right. The button. Yeah, click. Okay. Let's see where we're at. All right. As we usually do, like to just see if we've got any people here first time or maybe haven't been here in a long time. We'll start back here. Introduce yourself, let us know who you are and what brought you.
Attending the grape section, so I do out here.
All right. Well, welcome. All right. Back here.
Hi, I'm Joe Wattis. I'm faculty at Arizona State University. I'm here with my colleague, Professor McCarville. And I guess I've been a member for 25 years. I used to go to the North Meet, so it's been a long time. I have to say, this is much better than you.
But he only lives about 100 miles.
Yeah. Well. What?
You only live about 100 miles from here.
All right. Well, welcome. Nice. Let's see. Here.
David Calvert, moved back to the Phoenix area from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I've been in and out. I've been associated with ASQ and 0704 years in the past. The last event actually was not a meeting, but at the Six Sigma event up in North Phoenix in 2012, I think.
Huh.
But I work for Solid as a QC engineer. And what fascinated me was seeing the winemaking because I remember listening to Dr. McCarville talk about winemaking.
Oh. All right. Well, Dave, welcome. There's somebody over here in the middle.
Hi, I'm Kylie Nelson, and Rob Clinton. We're here with our boss, Richard Hoff. So, yeah, we're excited to meet.
All right. Well, welcome. Good. Richard, glad you could bring a couple of extra. Saw some others. We're over here. Okay. Okay. Welcome.
He's a great guy to work with. And he's still.
Eduardo Guerra. This is my first time here. I used to go to the Nogales section before, and then when I moved to Minnesota, I used to go to the one of the sections up in Minnesota.
Huh, well, your former chair's here.
So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm trying to reconnect to the ASQ.
All right, very good. Well, welcome. Well, any others? No? Well, yeah, we'll get to you, Dan. All right. Well, thanks very much. It's good to see a good representation this month. All right. Next, the job changes. Do we have anybody who's maybe seeking some new opportunities? Matt?
I'm also a certified reliability engineer by ASQ, and I have electrical engineering and also materials engineering background. I am looking for enhanced employment.
All right. Matt? Was there anybody else? Okay. Other side, do we have anybody here who might have something to offer?
We're going to be looking for a few quality engineers. So, and mainly it's going to be the second shift, desktop. In the Fusion 2020, there's going to be a lot of needs that we are going to need. And process engineers, analysts, and quality analysts, and a lot of operators.
All right. Well, very good. Good to hear. All right. Anybody else? Oh. All right. Well, whether you're seeking or looking, we do keep a career page on our website. Certainly check that out, see what's going on, and we will get you connected up with the latest information. Okay, this is acting up again. Okay. A couple of events going on. We've got some Six Sigma training that's going to start next week from ASQ in the Valley here. Also coming up in November, our friends over in California are going to hold their annual conference. So a couple of good activities that are coming around. Also, ASQ has another training event coming up this fall for several different activities. So if you are interested, this is a good chance to check these out and maybe increase your skill level and work for some certification or just general knowledge. Okay, so on to section announcements. Once again, a review of what we've been getting from you as far as meeting feedback. Looks like we've been doing pretty good. But we do want to ask that you continue to give us your feedback. Fill out the surveys. The survey access is through the QR code that's on your receipt, or you can go direct to our website and log on to this meeting and connect to the survey from there. We truly appreciate your information and help us to do better, and we want to provide what you need. So with that, also want to go over any announcements? I know, Richard, you had a little something from your division.
So my name is Richard Outlaw. Thank you. My name is Richard Uphoff, and I am also the Corporate Secretary for Development and Leadership Division. And I asked David if I could just make a couple of quick announcements about some work that we're doing in development and leadership. So first that I want to mention is the mentoring program that we just started with the ASQ Emerging Qualities Leader Program. It's a free program. You can access it like the other announcements I'm going to make through the ASQ. You can go to the Human Development and Leadership page. If you're interested in either becoming a mentee or a mentor, you can go there, learn about the program. We have a vetting process, and we're actually just getting started. We picked it up at July, back in May. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to mention, one of the other things that we do as a division is we provide free webinars available to any ASQ member. Our upcoming webinar is going to be Wednesday, September the 4th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, so 12 o'clock noon Arizona time. And it's called Tips to Hire, Train and Engage Millennials. The speaker will be Lou Police, and she is going to be talking for about an hour on how to engage millennials in the workplace. So again, it's free webinar for ASQ members. You can find information if you go to the My ASQ, go to the HTML page, and then it's under, I believe, services. And then the last thing that I'll just mention, just putting a plug, I've mentioned it here before, regarding, since school is starting now, this is a little bit early for next year, but HTML offers a $500 scholarship for quality professionals who are seeking to continue their education, either the associate's, bachelor, master's, or above level. And so again, you can find information on that on My ASQ, but it's kind of a nice benefit that our division offers, $500 if you have a couple of certifications and you're currently employed, but also seeking to continue your education. There's some funds available. You can find out more information there. And then the last thing I'll just mention is, for those of you that are maybe interested in presenting at next year's Lean Six Sigma conference here in Phoenix, I think the deadline for submitting proposals is next Wednesday. So you can get there through the ASQ website. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Richard. Any of our other officers or leaders? Bob, I know you've got something coming up. Jim, Tim, Jennifer, Amrish, Matt? Okay. Anybody else I missed? Okay. So I guess that's about it. Then we will. Okay. Well, give us over to Bob for a quick break here.
So just we have our guest speaker today. We do like to cover one topic of ASQ member benefits, and the topic we're going to talk about tonight, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but it is relevant and pertinent because we are now going through the process of building our leadership team for 2020, and we have a number of openings available. So the benefit I'd like to talk to you about tonight is around serving on committees and earning RUs. Before I get to that, I just thought I'd share a couple slides. How many of you are aware that ASQ recently modified its mission and vision statement? One? Couple of you? This is the new mission statement. I'll call what the past one was. I think what stands out here is they're really focusing on excellence through quality. And again, ASQ is a global society, so they talk about empowering people, communities, and organizations of the world to achieve excellence. So that's their mission. How do they accomplish that? What's their long-term vision is then to be considered as the thought leader and the community of choice to individuals and organizations who are seeking excellence through quality. Now, the section, Phoenix section, is as far as I'm aware of, we don't really have our own mission and vision. Now, previous to coming down here to Phoenix, as one of our attendees knows, I was the chair of the Minnesota section, and there we did have our own mission and vision, which obviously you wouldn't want it to conflict with Mother ASQ, but thinking more about what is the section all about and who do we serve, they have developed a mission and vision. So I have a proposed one for all of you to consider, chew on, and provide us some feedback. I guess I forgot to mention, so this is ASQ's new tagline, excellence through quality. So something short, sweet, you can remember. So my proposed thought for our section is to have a mission of fostering personal and professional relationships. That's what a section is all about, building community, collaboration. And then our role is to help equip you, our members, with the knowledge, skills, competencies to perform your tasks for personal growth and to help your employer, whoever that may be, improving their customer experience and organizational excellence. So then the vision, again, going back to thinking in terms of the golden circles, about coming up with a vision that is meaningful and compelling. Why would you want to join the section? My thought is, well, we want to be the community of choice here in the local area. We want to provide professional development. We're going to focus on sustaining a culture of quality, and we're going to embrace innovation and excellence to enhance member experience, because that's what we're here for. We want to enhance your experience with and of ASQ. So, speaking in terms of professional development, how you can earn RUs, if you go and look at the certification catalog and how do you earn RUs for recertification, you can earn up to 2 RUs per year if you are elected as one of our officers, elected officers, so either as the chair, chair-elect, secretary, or treasurer. As a member leader, so serving more as a committee chair, that's an appointed position, you can earn up to 1.5 RUs per year. And if you just want to participate maybe on an ad hoc committee, maybe participate on a committee but not be the chair, you're willing to take a small active role, you can earn up to 0.2 RUs per activity and up to 1.8 RUs per year. So another opportunity, in addition to just coming to the meetings and, of course, taking certification tests. So how does that relate to what we have available here in the section for you? Well, 2020 is the year we have a new committee rolling on. In fact, our chair, who serves a 2-year term, this year is his end of his 2nd year, so David will be rolling off as chair. And our treasurer is also a 2-year term, and that Amrisha is coming to the conclusion of that role, so treasurer is available. So now we're looking at who are all the people who currently serve on our executive committee, and do they want to roll up into the next position. So what I'm showing here is not cast in stone. We're still in the process of formulating what are the open positions, but this is our best guess as of today. So you can see we have a number of open positions. And each of these positions plays an important role. Jim Steele is currently our program chair. And Jim, you want to speak just maybe a minute about what a program chair does?
So my role is to bring...
Go ahead.
My role is to bring in speakers for every month. And so a lot of things that I'm able to leverage is the executive committee, and have a lot of contacts in the field, but also I got involved with ASQ activities, and Dan was very nice when I asked him to present, as he's presenting for us tonight. And so trying to set up the activities. I've got right now I've got activities all the way through January. And I'm hoping when I pass it off, at least give you a person that can fulfill this job, at least 3 months, push it. And so, but it's a lot of fun. You get involved with a lot of different people, and you're part of the executive staff. And so, get that connection and networking.
And then Tim Lane is our current secretary, and his term is coming to conclusion. You can see that's one of our elected positions that is currently open and available. So if you might have an interest in serving as our section secretary, Tim, you want to explain just a little bit of what that involves?
Yeah, basically, the main thing that I do is attend the various executive committee meetings, audit meetings, stuff like that, and take the notes and then make sure that everything is reported properly, and really make sure that any activities that are supposed to happen, the deliverables that people might get, report that accurately and make sure that it happens. It's not a bad gig, really. It's about 3 or 4 hours a month, probably, by the time you do the notes and everything. And it's good for 2 RUs. So, I've been doing it for like 3 or 4 years now, and again, it's great to get that inside understanding of what goes on in the organization. So,
thank you, Tim. And we also have Jennifer here. Jennifer is our current arrangements chair. And I'd like to speak a little bit about Jennifer.
Okay, so what I do, I make sure we have a meeting space every month, and we're just lucky that Edward Jones has provided us this beautiful space for us. And then also I liaise with the caterer here, which is Aramark, and make sure that we have our snacks every month, and that's an email, maybe 2 emails every month. And then on top of that, I copy the RU units and bring them, make sure they get handed out to everybody. And then I make sure that we have a sign-in sheet for that month, have everybody sign in. And I hand out raffle tickets to everyone, and I buy the gift cards and also the name tags. So you just have to bring all that every month. And probably 4 hours a month, if you count the shopping and the bringing and everything like that.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Let's see, looking around the room, who else do we have here? Sort of rolling off. We have, of course, Amrish is our current treasurer, but we do have someone who's earmarked to come in as treasurer. You speak a little bit about what the treasurer does?
So I've been treasurer for last 2 years, and what is our income? So what comes out from membership and what our expenses are. I contribute to developing the budget for the following year. So that's the first activity that happens. We just want to forecast what is that we will have in terms of revenue and expenses, so budgeting. And then once we have a budget, you manage the budget. Spend exactly what's within the budget, and if it is not, if we something see very valuable, then have some consensus. With the committee that yes, we can do that, and we allocate funds appropriately. So that's the second part. So throughout the year, out things. For example, if Jennifer buys tags or gift cards or something, or other people internet stuff that buys it, they usually get it. I do need to look at people's and then so that physically issue a check and mail it to them. So that's the activity part of it. And overall, then every quarter, a treasurer is required to have a quarterly statement. So I also do tally up what our incomes and expenses are per quarterly basis and then submit to our central team for that. And then at the year end, we have annual, report that we need to do, which is far more important because that has a significance to IRS. We are required, being a part of organization, we are required to provide that information on behalf of our sections. So overall, I need to make sure that the documentation, actually, we will be having IRS audit, at ASQ, and we are required to provide information. So it is a great job, but it definitely has some responsibilities as well. So that part of it. So overall, budgeting, managing the expenses and looking after, like, the auditing and every part of it. So I probably would say, like, every month, maybe, like, 3-4 hours. Every quarter for, for making sure the quarterly report, another couple of hours. And at the year end, to make sure all the documentation, everything is, maybe 7-8 hours. So it is a great job. I think, let me tell you why I took this. Being an engineer, I never knew finance and something I really wanted to learn. And this probably was the most smallest logical chunk that I could think of, and I felt really rewarded. So thank you.
And finally, we have Cass, who's rolling off as our education chair. Matt, you want to speak a little bit about what that entails?
Sure. Since I talk so much, I'm going to be short. About the training, available trainings, either online or physical trainings, or I also get questions about the certifications, recertifications. And answer is usually easy. I just refer them to the ASQ website. Otherwise, there are other people answering the questions too. So I would say it would take probably only a month, only an hour per month to get this educational chair job, unless, the responsibilities gets bigger and stuff. But usually it's just 1 hour per month.
Thank you very much. All right. So before I know we're running into a little bit of speaker time before we get off. I did want to talk a little bit about the role I am leaving. So if I'm going to take on chair, it's probably a little too big of a bite to chew to also be the webmaster, the Facebook manager, LinkedIn manager, Twitter manager, Instagram manager, and YouTube channel manager. So all of those positions are open. The Internet Liaison manages our 2 websites. We have 2 websites. ASQPhoenix.org, which is an external to ASQ. And now we have a new one on the MyASQ platform. All ASQ sections and divisions are slowly being migrated to the MyASQ. There's a lot of interconnectedness that benefits from that. We're not sure what the future will be of our current external website, because we also want to continue to have a face to people who are not members of ASQ. And from what we know of MyASQ so far, if non-members sign in, they will see some limited information, but just how much, we're not really sure yet, because it's still in the process of maturity and rolling out. Then we have social media coordinators. Those would be the people who represent the section on those social media platforms I mentioned. Now currently I'm doing all of it, but it's not that big of a task. And I'm retired, so I can manage it, and I'm very well connected too. But in my mind, this would be ideal. If we have any younger people here, the millennials or Gen Xers who are very studious and very adept and know how to navigate, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, this would be a great role for those people. And it doesn't have to be one person doing it all. We can split it up any number of ways. And then we've got a communications committee where our newsletter editor, our webmaster, our social media coordinators all get together, and we kind of put together a calendar of events. So who's going to talk about what, and make sure we cross-promote on the different platforms. So it's a very exciting, and it's a way to connect to the younger generation and to the newer people coming into ASQ. All right, so if you wish to go to our website, you can download this presentation. You can learn more. I'm not going to go through these. We've already discussed many of them, but there are some high-level bullet points. There are job descriptions, or what ASQ calls position descriptions, on many of these. We are in the process now of kind of tailoring them specific to what that involves within the section. But ASQ does have a generic set for all of these positions. You can look those up. All right, if you are interested, please either contact us through this Gmail address, or you can log on to our website, and within the website, look for the Call for Volunteers form, check a box of whatever you might be interested, leave your name and email address. We would love to hear from you, because we are now in the process of trying to put our committee together for next year. So thank you for your time. And I'll roll it back to Dave to introduce our guest speaker. Yeah, for those of you in the room, you can also stop any one of us.
Connected to you. All right. Just one quick thank you once again to Edward Jones. We really appreciate this facility. Works out great. It's comfortable, and we get some good food here. So thank you very much. On to our speaker tonight, Dr. Dan McCarville. MS and PhD from Arizona State in 1994 and 99. Research interests are in quality engineering, industrial statistics, and engineering management with a general focus on continuous improvement methodologies. He's also worked 27 years in the semiconductor industry for Motorola and MindSpeed Technologies, where he led teams through development, implementation of large-scale quality systems and complex manufacturing processes. Yes. Yeah. All right. With that, Daniel, we're going to turn it over to you.
I got to get plugged in.
Thank you. All right.
Like that. Shove that in there. Any other microphones? Let's do 2 mics. Look like hopefully I should have brought suspenders. Okay. Oh man, I look them now. Okay, pretty good? Loud enough? I talk loud anyway. I really don't need a mic. In fact, the people online could hear me without the mic. I need a clicker. I can't talk without a clicker. I got to make sure. Now the laser pointer is that one, right? Because you got to be able to shoot people. And then that advances, and then that does something else. I'll just not touch that button. Well, I really want to thank you all, especially Jim, for inviting me to be here this evening. In fact, Jim, I don't think you told me that this is going to be the old university, room. In fact, the last time I was in this room was probably 25 years ago, in that seat right there, roughly speaking, and so forth. But I just a little bit about myself, and wait, I've got to what, 10:30 you said? 10:30, okay, 10:30. I started at Motorola in 1984, and in kind of about 87, 88 or so, I think that's about Bob Galvin. I don't know if you know who Bob Galvin is. He was the son of the founder of Motorola and was CEO at the time. He sends his email out and says, we're going to start this thing called Six Sigma. At that point, and for the first year and a half of this whole process, I assumed he invented Six Sigma. I didn't know that there was people like Bill Smith and so forth that were in the background, but I assumed that he was. So we're all marching to it, and I had taken like an 8-hour class on SPC from a visiting engineer from the Ford Motor Company, then kind of like just a little before this. So that made me an expert, and therefore I was tagged to kind of help with my facility, which was 52nd Street, with the rollout of Six Sigma, right? So we're developing materials and all that kind of stuff, and kind of came to the conclusion that I really didn't know what I was talking about, but we were making up some pretty good stuff, and it was a lot of trial and error and so forth. But that's one of the things that people like Doug Montgomery. Some of you guys know Doug Montgomery because we chatted about that already. He started at Arizona State University, 88 time frame and so forth. So we started taking some classes of his, and one thing led to another, and here I am today. So I moved to California. I left Motorola in '99 and moved to California, where I was head of quality for a semiconductor company there called MindSpeed, which is now, I left, has been acquired by another company, which has probably been acquired by another company, and so forth. You guys know how that industry is, and so forth. This looks a lot like my classrooms. Nobody in the front row. Lots of people in the back row. And the most pathetic part, guys, and this is pretty pathetic. Joe, a fellow professor, faculty member is sitting in as far away as possible. And that's so he can sit there with his cell phone and play Candy Crush in the back row, just like a lot of the students do. Yeah, you can't hear me. So I mean, come on, man. I can excuse most of these people, not all, but most. But you, really? So let me ask this question. So we're going to talk a little bit about wine. Any winos out there? I'm sorry, wine drinkers out there? Wine drinkers out there? Okay, yeah, me too. I love the stuff and so forth. And in fact, my friend, I'll come back to him a little bit in this as well. Doug Montgomery, he's a wino too. And so we enjoy wine, and we made wine and so forth, and have played all sorts of little blending games over the years and stuff like that. But this became a real problem. So I got to kind of tell you my story here. That worked. Introduction to the story, process constraints, optimal solution forward, and things like that. And we're actually where we are today, because we're still even though I'm going to be talking about an experiment, details of a blending experiment that we ran. Would have been in 2012. I guess a 2011 vintage largely, and I'll talk a little bit about the early ones. But we could still continue to do this today, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Every year we get together, me and the winemaker and maybe a couple others get together and do the same process. So again, we've heard a little bit about me, but kind of the players in this is also Elisa Custer, Dr. Elisa Custer. She's a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, all of that. She's my wife. She went to school, both of us were studying under Doug Montgomery at ASU through the 90s. When you're working full-time, it takes all of a decade to do that. Doug Montgomery, he's a player in this. And Chuck Vellante is our winemaker, and so forth. And tell you a little more about Chuck, a very interesting person, to say the least. He thinks any chemicals in here? He thinks they rule the world, and so I have to listen to that a lot. The story, so he and his family, I've been running this co-op. The French call it a garagista, right? Where basically, and literally, making wine out of a garage. And I know somebody else, where's my here, Dave here, right? Knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so, in fact, I guess my father was doing it. Well, when we were kids, I remember he'd have literally Welch's grape juice concentrate, Fleischmann's yeast, a gallon jug, and a balloon to not let it and all that. It was awful. But he's been making it since 2000. So and he moved in across the street from me in 2007 vintage. But he moved in about April, May of. I guess April of 2008, right? And I saw all this wailing and hammering. The sold sign went up, and I never saw any birds, but there was the garage. It was a unique house. It had 4-car garage, and this is right across the street from us. It had 2 normal garage, normal 2-car garage that you turn sideways into, but it had a tandem garage that you could pull straight into from the street. And that's why he bought the house, because before he could even move into this place, he had to take the back half of that garage and turn it into a cellar, because you have to be able to roll barrels in and out of this thing pretty easily, and the garage was unique for that, and keep it at 55 degrees and put the units on there. And then the front half was largely where we did a lot of the production and so forth. You have your stainless tanks and things like that. So he turned his tandem 2-car garage into a winemaking facility, a small winemaking facility, right? And so I thought it was just very captivating, and so I was hooked pretty early on and joined right away. We were making about 100 cases of wine a year back then, and we were making pretty much exclusively Syrahs. We started a little blend. I'll talk about that with some Grenache and Mourvedre and so forth, but it's principally Syrahs was what we were making. The reason for that is that this is in, I should have mentioned this is in Southern California. So this is in Tustin, which is kind of a little city sandwiched between Irvine and Santa Ana. So if you know the Southern California, Orange County area. So it's kind of southern part of Orange County, right? And so forth. And so, we didn't want to drive up to Napa to get grapes and stuff like that. And we weren't as interested in what Temecula was growing, but we felt that the best Syrah grapes available in California, we still contend that that's the case today, come from the Santa Barbara area. So the Central Coast, that's considered the Central Coast area of California. And so we were buying really good grapes in small quantities because the farmers and the vineyard and so forth didn't seem to have a problem with selling in small quantities. We were buying some really, really good grapes and of Syrah. But and later, the last couple, 3 years before we went professional, like 2013, 2014, we started playing around with a little bit of Viognier and Pinot, and that took us up to about 150 cases of wine a year. And so, and relatively speaking, we were dealing with 30-gallon barrels, those are half barrels, and 60-gallon barrels. 60-gallon barrels makes about 25 cases. So that's kind of the scale of this. I said we only buy really good quality grapes. We did. The Syrah grapes run about, I forget, about $2,500 a ton. So that's a little bit of bank. The Pinot grapes run between $6,000 and $8,000 a ton. So they're quite a bit pricier. So forth. But we would buy the best because I mean we're doing this as a hobby, right? And so forth. So we weren't out to make some sort of schlock as fast as we can, or really have just boatloads of really crappy wine that we had to drink or give to our friends for Christmas or something like that. We wanted to make the best we could, and so we bought the best we could, and we babied every single barrel, and we still do that to some extent today. We had all the equipment, so we had these big stainless steel tanks and stuff, or not big. Little stainless steel tanks, although they were kind of big. So we just like the producers, we had a crusher to stem. You'll see some pictures of that too. Electric. We had a press. We had a little manual corking machine. We had a little bottling kind of a machine and so forth. Manual, but with an electric pump for pumping the wine into it, and a little toilet thing that kind of kept it level and so forth. Anyway, the whole point is that we had oak barrels. We bought oak barrels. Oak barrels run about $800 a piece. So it's not a cheap part of the game, but. So we're trying to do the best we can. Basically, like all winemakers, and most winemakers throughout the year, when you got these things in the barrels and so forth, you're barrel tasting, right? I mean, you just can't help it. You got 150 cases worth of barrel wine in your wine cellar. You're frequently going to taste it, right? And for fun, but also for monitoring, controlling, things like that. There's quite a bit of control to do on this. But you also start to figure out how you're going to mix these things up, right, into maybe some different blends. Okay? So he would always try to do that. And his general model was he would, throughout the year, he would be tasting these things, and he'd kind of come up with maybe an optimal solution, and then you have what's left over, which I term the residuals, right? So from that statistics, so anyway, never mind. But you got your optimal solution and some sort of residuals. Or once in a while, he just said, it's pretty good. Just throw everything together, all the barrels into one big pot and bottle that. And we just have one label that year. That's kind of how he played it. But he thought he was pretty good at picking the best blends. Some sort of, and he used to use different capsule colors to say, ooh, this one's silver, it's our best, or whatever, right? So he would play that game. This is where I saw the opportunity to help. So again, I've only known him about a month now or whatever. I joined his co-op immediately, right? And I said, we could make this a lot better. Now he's an engineer. I mean, he's an engineer, so he kind of caught on to this whole idea. Maybe this is something we're thinking about. And so in fact, I have to tell maybe the funniest story of all. He got to know me well enough to know that what my background was, and I remember, I was in. They had just moved into the house, and there's something a little funky going on with the cooktop. They had a Viking gas cooktop in the kitchen, and it was sparking. And I remember telling his wife, "Well, that's because it's wet. You just cleaned it." And she says, "Oh, it's so nice to have a smart engineer around here," and. To this day, Chuck doesn't let me live that down, and so forth. But I saw the opportunity to help, and he was listening, and I said, well, why don't you let me run a design experiment? And it was just you and me. We could get others involved, but maybe we do the first time just you and me. So on a Thursday night, just a few days before he and the co-op members were going to select what they blended, which was, you know, he's going to tell them, like, this is what you're going to get, but they come in for a little tasting to play with it. We sat down one evening and we ran an experiment, okay, a designed experiment. Tell you a little bit about wine. Anybody gone on winemaking tours and so forth? They're a lot of fun, especially the part at the end where they let you drink some of it, right? But winemaking is actually a blast, okay? But it's a little bit of a lengthy process. So for us, you know, we would buy into the co-op in February, because that's when we'd have to make our contracts with the grape growers, the farmers, as to what we wanted to buy. So Chuck would get up, and he had to determine how many grapes they're going to buy based on how many co-op members wanted to play. A share in our co-op was 2 cases of wine when we're all done. So he would, you know, and so you'd give him, it was like $425 a share, right? And so that's actually a pretty good deal when you think about it for wine. So we'd give him our money for each share that we wanted to own, and he would go order the grapes. So you order them in February, right? And hope that you get what you. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes it's just a really bad year in one of the vineyards and high temperature, rains, whatever, and so you don't always get all what you want, but you do what you can. Okay, so in September, October time frame, especially in the Santa Barbara area, in a typical year, the grapes come in, they get harvested, right? And so now we have to go get them. So we pick them up in a bin, you know, just like that one there, right? So that's just a regular fruit bin. All the big people in the wine business do that too. That's our crusher destemmer right there. So it's got an electric motor on it, and it kind of crushes the grape. It really just kind of punctures the grape a little bit, but it removes most of the stems. And if you want to remove them a little bit more, you hand pick them out and so forth, whatever, depending on the stems actually contribute some flavor, whether you like it or like that flavor or not. And so anyway, then we throw them in, we destem crush, and then we put them in a stainless tank for ultimately for fermentation. Usually we leave them in the stainless steel tank for about 5 days in the 55 C wine room, the cellar, so to speak. That's to allow the grapes to come in contact with the juice. For a red wine, so you don't really do this so much with white wines. You kind of crush it and get all the juice out and let it rip. With a red wine, most of the color, flavor, and so forth comes from the skin. And so you want them to be in contact. You want it to be in contact with the juice. And so you let it be in contact, and it's redder and redder, because otherwise it's kind of a light pinky color to begin with, the juice. And you leave it in contact, and the tannins and all that kind of stuff kind of get in there. Okay, and then that allows you to do that first. So you let it soak in there for a while. Looks like a grape soup and so forth. Come on, next one. Oops. Then we add these. So a lot of winemakers just let whatever yeast is in the air, let it rip. Up in the wine countries, if you've been making, you know, in France, you've been making the same wine the same way for 500 years. Generally, the yeast that is just with what's called native yeast. It's the preferred yeast for that region anyway, and they don't inoculate it. We inoculate it. You can buy specific yeast. None of them are named Fleischmann's, okay? But you can buy specific yeast and for your wine. And we would use a couple different yeasts because we wanted a little bit of the variability and complexity. I will tell you that you think, well, what could the yeast possibly do? I can take the same juice, split it into 2 different barrels. I can put 2 different yeast on it, and you might even think they're 2 entirely different varietals. It's a huge contributor based on your preferences and flavors and stuff like that. So the yeast is really a big item. And there are some yeasts that are largely, call it, designed for certain kinds of grapes. So there's a whole little portfolio of yeast for Syrah grapes. There's another portfolio of yeast for Pinot grapes. It's a little more gentle. The Pinot's a little more of a fragile fruit and so forth, where the Syrahs, man, you need something really aggressive to let that rip. During this time, what happens is that the skins float to the top because it's fermenting in there and it's giving off, you know, carbon dioxide and so forth, and so everything starts to float. So you start to lose that skin to juice contact. You still want to have that through the fermentation. Again, you want to get all the flavors out of the skins that you can. So a few times a day, you got to sit there and punch them down. It's an old canoe boat or until you need to punch them down in the stainless steel tanks and so forth, just to keep it kind of a murky grape soup, so to speak. After we're kind of done with all the fermentation and everything, we press it. So this is a mechanical press. It's hard to tell. I know that's a lousy picture, but it's just a ratcheting mechanical press, a basket press. Actually, a lot of winemakers use basket presses, even advertise that they use basket presses. Others will use a bladder type press and so forth. And we wrap it in cellophane because sometimes you get a little aggressive with the pressing, worked up sides, and we didn't want to lose too much. So anyway, and so we press it and we dump it and put it back into the stainless steel tanks. Now, what comes out of this pressing process, this stuff is murky. Now, most of the seeds are out, but there's still some grape seeds in there. There's still some gook. It actually tastes a lot like wine. I mean, it pretty much tastes like wine. It's just really, really, really young wine and you got a filter between your teeth because it's got all sorts of floaties in there and stuff like that, and solids and things like that. And it's not transparent. It's pretty murky. Okay. And so what we do is we put it back into the stainless steel tanks to settle, right? And a good probably 80% of the murk settles out in about a week or so, right? And you end up with this layer of pink sludge on the bottom of the stainless steel tank, and then something that still look a little better, but it's still not quite that transparent, right? A little bit better. So get back to the next one. After a week or so, we do what's called racking. So we rack the wine into the barrels. Basically, we're just pumping the wine off the top of the tank and leave the murk behind, right? So we pump until we can see all the murk. It's pretty distinctive, that boundary there. And so we pump it off and we pump it into our barrels. And we would use some new oak barrels, some used barrels, and so we call used, we call them neutral oak barrels because it depends on how much oak contribution you would like to have in your wine too. Another major contributor to the taste, of course, is the oak barrels. So we rack them, and then we do that racking thing because it still starts to settle, right? So when you buy a bottle of wine and it says unfiltered, unfined, right? It's like in really fine print. So like nobody usually we're on the cork and drinking it before we notice that. But you see that unfiltered. Well, that means that it was racked. It went through the same process, right? Because you could easily go get a big coffee filter or something, a really big coffee filter, something like that. You really filter this stuff too, but filters contribute to the flavor. The filters have their own flavor profile to some extent. So if you want that little extra Mr. Coffee flavor in there from the filter, then go ahead and filter it. But most winemakers, especially with red wine, don't filter it. You rack it. So you just let it settle. Then you pump off the barrel, top of the barrel, and leave the murk behind. Wash out the barrel, right? And so typically goes something like this. You take this, you get an empty barrel or a tank. You pump into this one. You wash this barrel out. Then you pump and you daisy chain it a little bit, and you pump along. Now, if there's a certain barrel you want to keep wine in, you'll put it in a tank and then pump it back in. But the point being is that the murk settles out. And you do that 3 or 4 times in a year, and you end up with a nice clear wine you see in your glass, right? It's pretty good. And every time you do any of these activities that I'm talking about, you drink some of it, right? Especially as a co-op, right? Because we get together as a group to do these things. So for us, about 11 months or so after the grapes arrived, we have to bottle the stuff. So, and the reason why, you might say, well, you see on some wines aged in oak for 2 years or 18 months or stuff like that. We actually had about an 11-month window to make the wine. And that was because the capacity that we had in this little single stall garage, and so for the back half of it in the 55-degree room, we could only get about six big full barrels in there, maybe 1 or 2 little barrels in there if we need to, half barrels. But we didn't have the capacity to be running 2 different vintages at the same time. So we basically had to be done with one before we took the grapes and started the process for the other. So we had about 11 months to get the wine into the bottle and so forth. Or, well, that's when we would do the designed experiment that I'm going to talk about. And then shortly after that, we do the blends and bottle it. I think I talked about it. So here's the constraints. This is the problem that we have in running this kind of experiment and making wine, especially in a small operation. Mixture experiment. So I got to ask this question. You're going to see that I just love running experiments. In fact, I used to, at Motorola and INC, I used to do a lot of experiments. Anybody design experiments? You guys like it? Fun? I mean, it's hard to believe that they pay us to do this. Okay? I mean, that's how much fun it is, right? Mixture experiments. Anybody run a mixture experiment? Most people go through their entire life without ever running a mixture experiment, so there's no obligation to know how to do it. But it's a weird problem. So statistics. Anybody do a regression analysis, things like that, least squares, analysis variance, all that kind of stuff, right? And so forth. Boy, yeah, just like my class. There's people sleeping in the back. Joe, are you awake? Yeah, he's awake. So let me explain a little bit of problem. Let's say, let's see if this works. Let's say we're going to make lemonade, and all we're going to do is lemons and water. Okay? Okay? Factorial experiment. We're going to do a factorial experiment making lemonade. Okay? We're cheap. We ain't got no sugar. You know, or whatever. So factorial experiment. I've got lemons, and I got water. Can you guys see that? I'm not. No, some of you guys are probably can't, but can anybody else see that? You guys are so far back. So let me talk about this. Probably should have done it the other way. And my high level, right? So we'll talk about one lemon versus, low level, I'm going to have just one lemon. High level, we'll have 2 lemons. Okay, makes sense? Something like that. This is 1, and this is 2, right? And water, we'll do 1 gallon, and we'll do 2 gallons, right? 1 gallon, and we got 2 gallons, right? So forth. And so what would our response be on our lemonade? Taste, right? I assume it's certainly that's important, taste, right? Concentration, strength, we can come up with different things. So let's say our response is taste, right? So I'm going to run I said I'm going to run a full fact experiment. I think I can fit that all on this paper here. So we're going to have 4 runs. We're not replicating it. 4 runs. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got my lemons, and I've got H2O, right? And I'm going to alternate this 1, 2, 1, 2, and I'm going to have this 1, right? I just made a full factorial designed experiment on lemonade that's really bitter, right? So but let me ask you something, and then we're interested in a measure. We're interested in a measure on taste, right? Would you expect run 1 and run 4 to taste differently? There's a problem here, right? So that's the funky part that I'm going to you'll see a little bit, and maybe my design for running the mixture experiment. One of the most significant requirement or constraint in running a factorial any kind of experiment or doing regression analysis, doing any kind of least square kind of, is that the x variables, these guys, your factors, are independent. Right? They have to be independent. Right? Our problem is that if I were to make this juice, I could have said this is a quart of juice and stuff like that. Our problem is that our 2 factors, x1 and x2, or lemons and water, add up to 100%. They're not independent. Right? They're absolutely not independent. So that means using this kind of an approach will get you the wrong answer, right? It doesn't work. So you have to do something called a mixture experiment. And there's a really funky way to line this up. By the way, Jump, Minitab, Design Expert, and so forth, these tools all do mixture experiments. It's really pretty cool. But if you ever think this could be a mixture experiment, I remember in those semiconductor wafer fabs, we were dealing with partial pressures on an etching system. It was a mixture experiment, even though we weren't really measuring. It's kind of more dealing with flow rates and stuff like that to a certain extent. But anyway, so that's my problem. This is a constraint. All my wines add up to 100%, right? And so now I lost my nubby. Oh, there it is. So that's constraint number one, kind of a biggie. So that's the other part. We have one experienced winemaker and a whole bunch of drinkers, right, who think we know something about process and how to rate and scale wine. So another problem, I got one person who really kind of knows what he's doing. That's Chuck, and the rest of us. Limited amount of time to run the experiments. We all got day jobs and stuff like that, and we've got certain constraints. So it's not something that we could. And we'd like to get when we do stuff with this co-op, it's almost kind of a legal requirement to make wine, and you can't make and sell wine unless you got a liquor license and so forth. But if everybody's somewhat involved in the winemaking process, they get to belong to a co-op. You can't just pay your money in February and then show up and pick up your box of wine at the end. That's buying wine, right? So there's a kind of requirement to be involved, and most people really want to be involved. And so to get everybody together and say, let's be involved in running this, not everybody, but at least a handful of folks out of the co-op, we didn't have all day to do this. The number runs in the experiment, the different combinations in the experiment, however you're doing it. I'll explain why later, but should be less than or equal to 25 runs. Okay, now I'll come back to that and explain why. 75. So if you wonder, boy, I got a bottle of night Cabernet, it's delicious. One of the assumptions a lot of people have is this is all Cabernet. I assure you, for most wines that you're probably buying, it is not. Right? To call it a varietal, 75% within that bottle has to be that varietal. Right? So if you're if you want to call it a Cabernet, you could have 75% Cab and 25% Merlot. You get to call it 25% anything. You can still call it a Cab, right? It can be 75% Cab, 10% this, 10% that, and so forth, and you can still call it a Cab. Okay? So that's a little bit of a constraint that becomes a little more important later as professionals. We didn't really give a rip too much about this as a co-op because we're not selling the wine. We're just trying to make the best stuff we can. This becomes important later too. If you want to call it a Napa Valley wine, have the appellation on the bottle. 85% of the grapes, whatever it is, have to come from Napa Valley. Okay? Now, why would you want to do that? Why would you give a rip? We actually, as a co-op, we probably didn't. But again, as professional winemakers, this became a little more important. Why? Price. Yeah. Yeah. If I'm saying this is coming from, what does it think of the Rancho Cucamonga, which is right next to Ontario, right? Well, I'm not going to draw the same price, even if it's a fabulous wine, that I'm going to say Napa Valley, right? Or, Santa Rita, Santa Rita Valley and so forth, near Santa Barbara, or and so forth, Santa Maria, and so forth. All these different appellations and so forth that people know. Ooh, that's good, right? So 85%, which means you can still have 15% come in from other places. The other one is 85% must come from a specific vineyard if you want to give it a vineyard designation, right? And again, as a co-op, we didn't worry as much about that, but professionals, again, who's a snooty wine drinker? Oh, he's going to raise their hand on that, even though I know. Yeah, there you go. So So when you see something like estate bottled wines, or when you see a wine that comes from the ABC whatever vineyard and so forth, and you say vineyard designations is usually often the better and more expensive wines. Usually the very cellar, if you like to cellar your wine, hold on to it for 5, 10, 15 years. Often it's the vineyard designation wine that you do that with, right? And people charge quite a bit more for those, right? So you can get a better price for single vineyard wines typically than the non-single vineyard. So these are kind of constraints that become a little more important to us later. Our other one is, and this is kind of a big one for us, is we have to use all the grapes. It's not, a lot of these really big, especially the really high-end wine makers, they make a lot of wine, and they've got some residuals that they don't want to bottle with their name on it. So who do they? And some of it might be actually pretty good, but it's not up to their $300 a bottle standard, right? And so who do they think they sell it to? Right? Which is one of the Franzia brothers. Who else do they sell it to? Yes. Yeah.
What can go wrong with the wine mixing process, and how do you solve the problem?
Oh, there's a lot of things there's actually things that go wrong with the wine making process. The mixing's pretty easy. That's not such a but in the wine making process, throughout any stage of the wine making process, we're very concerned about bacteria and things like that. So one of the biggest things is cleanliness is probably the biggest thing that we would focus on. We sterilize with not like radiation sterilization or whatever, but we would use commercial grade food grades and makes some powdered chemicals and things like that. But yeah, you have to you have to sterilize everything, right? And so forth. And you really have to keep the place, the environment very, very clean. A little bit of bacteria and your wine becomes, goes to vinegar. It just gets bad, right? And that can happen pretty darn fast. So that's the problem. So even when you're mixing wines, you still got to have everything really clean. So when we're doing the blending, we run the experiments, right, and all that kind of stuff. But when it's actually physically time to blend this optimal solutions out, we clean this. We've got it all in barrel now, but we have to clean out and sterilize the tanks. So we blend them all together, and then we bottle them. So and you got to clean the bottle. Since I was the neighbor across the street, we would spend about 3 hours before everybody showed up to bottle it just to clean everything out. So that was probably the biggest, if I would say, a biggest risk in this whole thing. Okay. But I think we must use all the grapes. Why? Because that's what we paid for. We didn't buy. Sometimes we have a little surplus grapes, but generally speaking, we bought grapes based on the amount of people that bought into the co-op, right? So we couldn't afford to buy 2X and then kind of throw away the stuff we didn't like. We would do, sometimes we have a little extra and we do other things that were highly illegal, but we're going to talk about that, and flammable, and explosive, everything bad, right? But the point is that we were obligated to use it. So some of the really big guys, like you said, if you don't have a $2 chuck, you can sell your schlock to, or what was the other one that was Cameron Hughes bought spider stuff. You see that at Costco, Cameron Hughes number 23, Cameron Hughes number 57. They have Costco floats that stuff around for about $20 a bottle. It's pretty good, but it's stuff like that as well, right? And then you might come across a Cameron Hughes that I just love it, and you go back 3 months later and it'll never to be used because it was just a one-off extra wine that one of the big people in Napa Valley had. So we have to use all our grapes. So if we've got some really crappy stuff, you come up with your optimal solution. If what's left over is just undrinkable, we still got, that's part of the co-op couple of cases you're going to get, right? So that's another part of the problem that we have to work through. That's another constraint. So, okay, our inexperienced winemakers that are all kind of helping us judge all of this stuff. What do you do about them? One of the there is a form. You guys know, if you go into Costco, wine at Costco, it's like a good deal. It actually is kind of one of the best places to buy wine from a per buck perspective. My wife, telling you about, she does Lean Six Sigma consulting, and Gallo Wines is one of her clients, and she got to work a little bit with some of the marketing folks and learned a lot about Costco and so forth. And so Costco really is a 15% markup. So. And then after they negotiate whatever price they get, so it's really kind of the good deals to be had. But you go through there and you see all these. Sometimes you see these little tags that says Robert Parker 94 points or something like that, or you see Tansler 89 points. So you see these scores, right? Well, there's actually a scoring process, and it's not from 0 to 100. It's actually from 50 to 100. So the worst wine in the world is actually a score of 50, right? It's kind of a little misleading. But most people don't know the process. There actually is a technical means of how you divide up the scores based on the various different things, and how it smells, clarity, color, acid, things like that. So there's a proper way to score these things, but most people don't know how to do it, and trying to get and that takes a lot of practice, a lot of training, and so forth. So we that was kind of a struggle. It's not like we could sit there and say, okay, let everybody come up with their scores and use those to evaluate, the quality of the wine as our response variables. And by the way, it would take a lot more time than we probably had. Another problem. So you're running this experiment. These are young wines, and they're exposed to the air for the first time, right? And you got all these different blends of wines in these glasses kind of lined up. And as you go through this process, as you guys know, the wine changes. That's why some people like to decanter. Got decanters and stuff like that. So the wine actually changes over time. So while you're running this experiment, depending on who's doing what part of the stage and so forth, the wines evolve in the glass. So that becomes another little bit of a problem. So what I did to kind of make things move along a little bit is I used the forced rank process. You guys ever hear about a kind of forced rank? Evaluate, if you had a whole bunch in the semiconductor industry, one of the things that we'd always have oxide thicknesses and all this kind of stuff. But I always took the opportunity, if I'm running any kind of big experiment on wafers, to say what's the best. I mean, from a clarity, color, range. We always kind of in semiconductor. Anybody in semiconductor wafers? Yeah, pretty is bad, right? I mean, so you get this nice, beautiful rainbow wafer, and that's bad. And but I actually found that to be pretty effective as another measure on the quality of the material. So sometimes it's hard to make the engineers rank them, worst to best, and then just number them. One being best to 27 being worst, or however many wafers I had. Well, the same thing here. We could do that with have folks go through and smell the wine, right? And they reshuffle all the glasses until they get their best here. We'll call that number 1, down to, let's say, 25 here, right? The 25th, that's their worst. And I'll record those. And then somebody else comes in and does theirs, and they reshuffle it. And I just sum them all up. And I end up with a numerical score. It violates a little bit of our normality assumptions that we sometimes worry about with the analysis that we're going to do, but usually not bad, right? And if it is pretty bad, I can do some transformations and things like that on the data to kind of fix that problem. So that's what I do, and it seems to work. So we're talking about that on nose, taste, and kind of an overall response variable, kind of your finish and things like that. Now, I put this in here because some of my fellow faculty members, Joe knows who I'm talking about. We call them OR people. There's the industrial statistics folks in the department, and there's the operations research folks in the department, and they think I'm just way off base on how I'm doing this process, but they don't know anything. They don't drink that much wine anyway. And by the way, in class, I remember Doug Montgomery, kind of one of the kings of DOE, showed us a forced rank method that he used in some of. I go off on tangents, and that's largely because I guess I could say I've never had an unspoken thought. my wife and I write the solutions manual for the Design of Experiments book, and one of his big problems in chapter 8 is his winemaking experiment. And so he was using some force rank methods and so forth in that. So he said, well, heck, if he's doing it in a textbook, it must be okay. And so, like I said, I mentioned I did this in semiconductors. So the force rank is kind of a cool idea, and I used it for blending. Okay. So, yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, like you take a bunch of wine, even if you're spitting it out.
We don't spit it out. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, it's dry after a while.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that's coming up. Okay, I would blow you guys. I would go straight to the end if I told you the answer to that now. So 2007 vintage. That was the first one that I joined, and that was our first little experiment, and it was just me, Chuck and I doing the taste and the ranking and stuff like that. We had Jack McGinley, Watch Hill, and 2 different barrels of Lowe's Trace barrels. So Lowe's Trace barrels, we had 2 different barrel types and so forth was how he made the wine. So we had basically 4 components. Unlike, we had, and water and so forth, we've just got four factors in our experiment, right? We ran a simple 4-component, and this is called, and the type of design, and you will see this in Jump, you'll see this in Minitab, is just a simple simplex centroid design, and that has 15 runs if you've got 4 components, and I'll show you what that looks like, sort of. I think you can kind of see it. It's like a 3-sided pyramid, right? Or really 4-sided pyramid, right? A triangle on the bottom and 3 triangles on the sides and so forth. That's kind of what I'm trying to show there. And the way this works, so that you can avoid this kind of a problem, is the points are 100% of that particular element or component. Okay, so this is Lowe's Trace Burroughs barrel 1. That's Lowe's Trace Burroughs barrel 2. That's Jack McGinley, and that's Watch Hill on the top of the pyramid, right? And then you can kind of see that in between, this is a 50-50 run, half Lowe's Trace Burroughs 1 and Jack McGinley, and so forth. So you got the 50-50s, and then you got the thirds on the sides, and then you got one overall center in the whole schmear, 25, 25, 25, 25, right? That's it. That's the experiment, 15 runs, okay? And so forth. So that's what we did. We ran, I'm not going to go into the details of the analysis or a little bit on this one. I'll show you the next one. I'll go into a little more, let me make it a little more interesting. So if I were to look at this, this is Lowe's Trace barrels. So in the analysis tools, if you're trying to do contour plots, you kind of you can't do 4 dimensions with your response variables. So what this is Lowe's Trace barrel 1, Lowe's Trace barrel 2, and this is the other 2 kind of combined mathematically and so forth. And then this is the contour plot, and this is the best area, okay, to choose from. That's my best wine, okay? And so it turned out that ended up being optimal, right? And that's about, if you look at this plot here, knowing this is 100%, and that one is red, that one is 100%. So this is about, as you kind of go through this one represents, so this is about 60% Lowe's Trace Burroughs 1, and about 40% Lowe's Trace Burroughs 2, roughly. Okay, that's the blend. That's optimal. Okay, that was the best scoring. And I'm looking at a desirability function. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But I'm trying to combine nose, taste, and overall finish and things like that into one final measurement score. So the problem here is if I'm going to do something that's got 60% Lowe's Trace Burroughs 1 and 40% Lowe's Trace Burroughs 2, that means I've still got another 60% of Lowe's Trace Burroughs 2 left, right? Or so, well, roughly, if this is all the same barrel sizes and so forth, and I got all this schlock over here left over, right? I have to use all of it, right? So I'm just using kind of a small portion of my overall wine volume to making that optimal solution, right? So what do I do with the rest? Well, just looking at it from a little bit different. This is what's left, right? This is largely Lowe's Trace, and it turns out that Chuck, when we put it all together and tasted it, it was really not very good. It was not very, and so Chuck was trying to convince me, well, that's the best that it can get. I said, well, no, let's try this. Let's try to take what's left and not run another experiment, but just use the mathematical model on what's left to tell me what's best. Can I get anything better out of this? And it turns out that right in here was something a bit better, and so forth. I'll show that. So that ended up being what we call I call the robust solution, right? And then the residuals ended up being about this point here in the whole scheme of things, and so forth. So I ended up with 3 blends that year, being the optimal solution. And what we did is we took, Chuck's been tasting these barrels for, I gotta watch my clock. Oh shoot, I really gotta watch my clock. So anyway, Chuck had been tasting these barrels for a bit, and he thought he had the best solution. I said, no, this is the best one. So we took our co-op together, and his was really pretty bad compared to what we did with the model. And as a result, we've been doing it ever since. So, again, it said, how did we get there? Well, we're using these models. It's pretty easy to find the optimal solution using a desirability function. I'll show a little bit of that. One unfortunate possibility outcome is you might just have a little bit. You could actually literally have a small quantity of optimal and a whole ton of schlock, right? And that unfortunately does kind of happen. So we play with the models, and one of the potential opportunities here is what if I readjusted it a little bit so it's not quite the perfect optimal, and I get a little more out of it, and in doing so I make the schlock a little better, right? So that's kind of the games that we would play using just the models. We're not drinking through this whole process. We're just using the models, right? And again, that's what I was mentioning. It could be poor. So we use the models of the response variables and then combine it into what's called a desirability function. And that's just a means of taking multiple responses and turning it into one for optimal. It's a little easier to play the optimality game and so forth. Using some, especially you can use some these software packages have some algorithms to help you find the optimal solution. So, but I was saying is that you certainly use the models to find the optimal solution, but we still use the same models to analyze what's left over, right? Now I'm going to get to the question that kind of came up a little bit earlier. Mixture experiments get bigger. For the 2008 vintage, same thing. We used a simplex Centaur design with 15 runs. We had 4 basic types of wine that we put together. 2009, oh man, we got good. We bought some Grenache and we bought some Mourvedre, right? And so forth. So we had Grenache in 2009 to the mixture, and in 2010 we had both Grenache and Mourvedre. So remember that varietal kind of constraint thing. So now we're kind of a little worried about, well, we're going to call it a Syrah or whatnot. That could become a problem. So what we ended up doing, though, is we constrained the experiment, because now we've got, like, I think 6 components in this experiment potentially in this year. And so we've got, we can use 100% of the Syrah, 0 to 100%, but we maxed the Grenache at 30%, we maxed the Mourvedre at 15%, because we didn't have a whole lot of it, right? Actually had quite a bit of Grenache, but we didn't have a whole lot of Mourvedre, and so that was kind of our game. I used what's called a de-optimal design, and that's just kind of one of these alphabet soup kinds of optimality criteria for setting up a designed experiment. Again, the software packages that I mentioned will do that for you, and it will go through a process of trying to find, based on the type of model you think you're going to ultimately have, it'll try to find this is the best places to put your experimental runs, is basically what we're doing. And it's using a numerical method for doing that and a search algorithm and so forth. It's kind of cool. And it came back with 36 runs, right? 36 runs. Well, remember that little constraint? This constraint is a result of this experiment for the 2010 vintage. None of us spit out the wine, right? And so what I started to observe is everybody's kind of going through this, and I'm typing in, getting their data points recorded and all this kind of stuff. And after about the 22nd, 23rd glass of wine, oh man, everything just started getting fabulous, right? I mean, oh, this is the greatest ever. Move this way to the front. I mean, this is just great. And then the next person comes up who hasn't been drinking at all and says, oh, that's just terrible. Move that back. But I mean, anyway, it was a difficult year for us. So I constrained it to 25 just because of that. In 2011, we were back to 15. No surprise, right? But we did in 2011. That's what I'm going to talk about. We did have 9 winemakers in this process. A lot of people started wanting to play, right? So some of them I didn't include their data in the experiment because they just. I mean, some of these folks are just so far out in left field. I said, "Are you kidding me?" Right? So, and outliers and all that kind of stuff. So we only used about 5 or 6 of them, and I did not tell anybody I didn't use their data in the model, and they still loved the wine when we were done. They didn't care. So one of the really cool outputs or features in Jump. So this comes from Jump. Anybody use Jump? A little bit. Kind of a neat tool, guys. Neat tool. So this is just a simple plot that's kind of showing here's my Jack McGinley 0 to 100%, Thompson 0 to 100%. It's a matrix. Martian ruined everything for us. It was a bad year from a production standpoint, kind of a good year for quality, but a bad year for production. So we lost one of our normal vineyards. I think we lost Watchhill that year. So we ended up getting a new one, Martian. Somebody says, "Hey, we got the Martian." Yeah, it wasn't very good. So, but that we didn't know. That's what we ended up with. We had a mixed barrel. That means that it was basically, what do you do when you got 10 gallons left of this and 12 gallons of this? You just kind of put it in one barrel by itself. So so we had basically 4 components again to the experiment. The nose model looks something like this, just one factor at a time. And as I'll explain this. You got nose, taste, overall, and then this thing called the desirability function, which is a composite in a way. It's a way to make a composite out of these 3 scores. Okay, I won't go into that, but it's just an arithmetic composite. And what you can do is you can slide this around a little bit, and it'll pull this down and it'll adjust these based on whatever interactions and behaviors and so forth. But you can also say, "Hey, find me the optimal," and the software will go through a search algorithm, and that's what this is. The optimal for this year's wine was basically, or this was, I don't know if this was quite optimal, but it came back and said someplace around here. Actually, I think it was 100% Jack, and it's telling us, don't use any Martian if you can avoid it. Well, of course, we had a lot of Martian. We still had to use it, but anyway, so I'm using this kind of a tool and technique to play my game on my ratios. It's all coming off of my numerical model that I fit, right? And that's kind of the process that I'm using for adjusting these things to finding optimal and suboptimals and so forth. Okay? So using the models. So what I always start out with is what we call a musketeer. That's basically throw everything we have into one. This is just an Excel file. Throw everything we have into one thing. What's the desirability we get? What's the scores we get on our model for nose, taste, overall, and so forth? And since I'm only using, I think it was 5 tasters or whatever, the best wine we could ever make, if you take the sum 5 people all calling a particular blend, would be a 5. And then the worst would be, the 15-run experiments would be like 75. So closer to the lower is better, and there's the overall desirability. That's not very good. None of this is very good. This isn't even middle of the road of the scoring. And this number here, 35, represents how many shareholders we are. So we had a little extra wine, it turns out, in this year based on our shareholders. But typically, when we're bottling, you put some in the bottle, you drink some, you put some in the bottle, and so people usually buy whatever leftover wine we have after bottling that day. Anyway, so we usually our co-op members usually go home with all of it. And then I've got one solution here, right? So I've got an optimal solution, right? It's playing the same quantity. So by the way, I've got 30 gallons of Jack McGinley, I got 60 gallons of Thompson, I got 90 gallons of this Martian we don't like, and I got a 30-gallon barrel of the mix, and so that's a half barrel. So now what I can do is I ran the optimal solution, turned out to be the best overall wine was 100% Jack, okay? But I only got 30 gallons of Jack, right? And so in this case, I decided, well, I won't use quite all of it. I'll save some because I got to make my residuals a little bit better. So I took 2 gallons out of that and put it over here, and then the rest of everything else, all of these things, and that's that. So this is my nose, taste, overall, pretty good scores. Lower is better. The desirability is between a 0 and 100, so this is almost 100. It's about as good as we're going to get. But this is not very good at all. So now I've got, and each share, remember each share is 24 bottles. They get 4 of the optimal solution and 20 of this, right? That's my problem, okay? That's the problem. So let's keep playing, right? So now I've tried this next one. So now I decide, well, we're going to do an optimal, suboptimal, and a residuals, right? So three wines. I'm still staying with Jack, right? I'm keeping my 4, but I took what was left over there, and I came up with a suboptimal that's better than before. Oops, go back, right? Better than this, right? But still not that great. And then I still end up with some schlock, which is just about all, which is almost, I guess, is all Martian virtually. It's not very good. Okay, Martian in that one mixed barrel. So, but I get 411, and I only get 9 basically bottles of the kind of the worst stuff. So then we said, okay, well, let's try another one, right? We're playing with all sorts of varieties of these. So now I start playing with a little bit. Well, what if I take away some more of that Jack? Because adding Jack to this others makes it better. So it turns out Jack and the Thompson, that's not bad. I lose 4 points on desirability, right? But this gets a little better. But the bigger deal here, by the way, is I get 8 bottles instead of 4 of my best wine. And I get 12 of this, which is kind of the same. And I only have 4 per share of the schlock. I do have some extras that people can buy. They'll all be drunk by the time they're done bottling, and they'll buy it anyway. And then we said, well, how about this solution? So I'm playing again. So now I'm up to 93. So I'm only 2 points off the best, right? This becomes 68. That's appreciable improvement, right? And so they get 6 of these, they get 12 of these, and they get 6 of those of the stuff that's not very good, right? And that's what we ended up going with that year, right? So you see, kind of see the problem is I got to use all the stuff, right? The experiments, look, when you're looking at the contour plots and so forth, the optimal solution we chose was here, but you can kind of imagine that was probably the true optimal, right? And so forth, if you had your choices. And then my robust was over in this region here, and my residuals was just pure Martian. We had a lot of Martian, and it wasn't very good. But they only had 6 bottles of that when it was all said and done. Okay? Today, I'm going to be 3 minutes over. That's because you guys talk too much. Okay. No, it wasn't me, right? Today, beginning with our 2015 vintage, we rolled out the Belante family winery, or BSW, right? And we went professional. Doug Montgomery was one of the instruments of doing this. He kept pushing Chuck, saying, you got to go professional. I'll chip in. I'll be a partner, and so forth. And so we had, like I said, about 35 members in the co-op, but only Chuck and four of us ended up being partners in this wine venture. We ran our first mixture experiment as professionals at our winemaking facility in 2016, right? Our grand opening was March 25th, 2017, and we made 500 cases of wine that year, right? So we had Syrahs, Pinots, and Viognier. That was our combinations. We're now producing about 1,200 cases a year, so we've grown a bit. That didn't show up very well. You can see the glasses all lined up. So we're at a winemaking facility doing this right now. You can see barrels in the background, sort of. But we got all these glasses lined up. We've got a graduated cylinder. I'm calling out the numbers. He's grabbing the wines and so forth and going for it. That's Mike is one of our partners. Chuck, you can't see him, but that's Chuck. Again, you can see he's using the graduated cylinder and like a turkey baster, whatever, trying to get the wine ratios out and so forth. And then that's the gang of us, Doug and Mike and me and Chuck in front of our barrels and so forth. So at our facility, our barrels and a few others. There's other people making wine at the same facility. There's a better picture. You can see looks kind of nice, almost like a professional. Anyway, so you get all the glasses lined up there and so forth. This is our tasting room if you're ever in Southern California, right? It's in Mission Viejo. I'm climbing up our barrel. That's what our barrel on the top. You can see the Delante barely, but I've got a wine thief and I'm pulling wine out of the barrel for us to. Actually, that time was just a drink. Today, as professionals, the experiments get bigger. That's a bigger concern. We're making more and more wine. We're getting more vineyards and stuff like that. We probably need to consider blocking if we get much bigger, because we'll be getting over the 25 glass constraint, or learn how to spit. I just can't do that. The other constraint is the 85%. So we're very interested in this. If we make a very good reserve, single appellation designated, single vineyard, we can sell it for $10, $15 more than if we didn't. So it's kind of important to us too. So now we got to sit there and say, well, the best wine or this. Typically, the other thing that's kind of been happening is we still do a little blending, but in general, Chuck has gotten very good such that at optimizing each vineyard. And so it's gotten to be a point where the single vineyards are truly better. Our time for running the experiment is still a constraint, and we still use the forced, should we still use forced strength, but we are. But we still have a constraint. We use this facility, but we all have day jobs. There's a friend of mine, Mickey Mancinitos, did actually an experiment, or she did her dissertation on categorical responses in mixture experiments. This is kind of fits into that, right? This could be. I might need to look into that a little bit more. I saw her defend her dissertation. I said, ooh, I might be able to use that. Should we use an optimization algorithm to identify the panel of solutions? The OR guys would love for us to do that, and we probably could. Should we use quantity as a response variable? And a guy named Pat Whitcomb, I don't know if anybody knows Pat Whitcomb, he's kind of the brains behind the Design Expert software and so forth. And so he was saying, hey, well, why don't you do this? And I said, make that a part of the response variable, because you want to get as much of the good wine as you can as well. And so some certain considerations. Accolades, that's my wife Lisa and me. I don't know if anybody knows that guy. Yeah, he's kind of famous in our field, right? Stu Hunter. So he really liked our wine. There's Stu Hunter again. Scott on the left, he's kind of the brains behind Minitab. So I'm trying to get support from all these guys on mostly. I just want them to buy my wine, but and then Doug and Cheryl. Any questions, recommendations, thoughts? I'd love to have brought some. We almost had that set up, didn't we, Jim?
Yeah, we're trying to work on that.
Yeah, I'd have brought some. They just didn't want us to spill red wine on this carpet, I guess. Any questions, guys? Oh yeah, you guys just don't get. Well, thank you guys.
All right.
I just got to get untangled in a second.
All right.
Pull up my pants. There we go. I don't know which one goes to which. Yeah.
All right, Dan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Guys.
We got a little
little
gift for you there.
Thank you.
And then we just have one more
Oh, sure.
task we would like to ask of you. Sorry, you online. We haven't figured out a way to put you in this drawing yet. Yeah.
Online with a Oh, son of a gun! That one's mine. I'm just kidding. Okay. 453013. Yeah, the treasurer. You knew it was going to be the treasurer. It's always the treasurer.
All right. Well, wrap this up quick. Thank you very much for coming this evening. We will be back here next month, September 12th.
Are we going to move to new venue?
That's right. We're gonna be down the hall. We're gonna try doing this in a classroom. So we aren't spread out across the entire.
To be in the front row.
Yeah, we got to put somebody in front. Yeah. So, but we will be in this facility. So next month, September 12th, and name escapes me here, but we will be back here and watch our website and newsletter. We'll have the details for you. Thank you very much.
Can I throw in one other comment here, and this is something you may want to pick on Joe about. I know a lot of you guys all come from the industry, folks, where most of us once resided as well. If anybody would like some free, really high caliber engineering help, we have capstone classes. Joe's managing our capstone classes this year. I did it last couple of years and so forth. So we can send a team of 3 or 4 seniors, you guys done senior capstone projects, to your facilities to help you work up a problem that maybe, or a project that maybe you haven't had time to do for a little while and it's nagging at you. And if you'd like, I'll give you my contact information. Joe's here. You can certainly ask us some questions about that. So we'd like to offer some free help.
Right. Again, thank you very much.